and welcome to Stranded in Pittsburgh. I hope you didn't like that little intro presentation video we had, because it will be different next week. But anyway, you see 3 people on your screen, and you're probably really excited because that hasn't been the case for a while. Because right in the middle of me and Nate is the returning, the prodigal son, the one, the only. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, and it's 5 o'clock shadow season. Ethan Morrison, welcome back.
Glad to be back after I don't even know how long it was since I was away, but it's been a minute. But glad to be back, ready to talk some Pittsburgh sports because we got a ton of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, we sure do. Almost a promising week in some aspects compared to the doom and gloom episode that was last week. But Nate, just because Ethan's back doesn't mean I've forgotten about you. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Finally recovered. The legs have finally recovered from our Sunday football game. So I'm ready to talk some Pittsburgh sports and not our sports that we partaked in over the weekend.
Absolutely.
Partook, or whatever the word would be.
Partooketh. But yeah, very excited to have everyone back. Rumbling? Heard a little rumbling? Jack O'Brien might be returning sooner rather than later due to a break in law school. So I don't know if the 4 of us have ever all recorded together since we relaunched here over the summer, because I think Nate was kind of brought in to fill in for Jack. Fill in's kind of a derogatory thing to say to the guy who's been saving our ass for the last 2 months. But we brought in Nate once we lost Jack. But he's on the 40-man now, and he's holding his own. He's more than holding his own. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about this week, and we'll start with last week when the Steelers defeated the Titans on Thursday Night Football. A lot to unpack here. And Ethan, because you were gone and we've missed you so very much, we'll let you start with your short little blurb on the game before we dive into more specific stuff.
Yeah, I think it was a vintage Steeler win in the thinking of how they've been playing and how they've been able to get these wins over the course of the season thus far. Just really nothing going on in the first 3 quarters of the game, and then putting together 1 or 2 drives on the offensive side late in the game in the 4th quarter and pulling out the victory. And they did just that at home to open up a 3-game to continue their homestand that the Steelers are on. And just looking, other than that first opening touchdown drive for the Steelers with Matt Cannon on the sideline for the first time, that was something. That first drive from the Steelers offense, that was something that everyone has been clamoring to see over the course of this year, and they finally got a taste of it. But really after that, it was just the same Steelers offense that we've seen over the course of this first half of the season, with not much going on until that 4th quarter of play. But credit to Deontay Johnson getting his first touchdown in a couple of seasons, since I believe January of 2022 was his last time that he found the end zone. So getting that touchdown there, getting that monkey off of his back was huge for the receiving core. Obviously, there's some things with some other wideouts that we'll get into later, but just looking to see, once again, how the Steelers team put it together and really just saw how they were once again able to claw their way in this defense, their ability to continue to keep the team in games. And we just saw it pay off once again Thursday night with that victory over the Titans.
Nathaniel.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things that Ethan said. And Ethan and I were sitting next to each other for about the first half of that game because we were at Highmark Stadium covering WPIAL soccer, the championships that were happening over there. And we both were sort of in a little bit of a shock that the Steelers scored on their opening drive. Their first time all season we've seen that. So, it's a good sign there. And then we saw the typical offense that we've seen the rest of the first half where they really couldn't get much going. And then we saw, again, the typical offense scoring late in the game to basically give them the lead and take care of business. But, it's basically what we've seen over the past couple of weeks. Offense doing just enough. Defense playing pretty much lights out against, especially Will Levis, who had 4 touchdowns the week prior. And a lot of people were a little concerned how they would hold up against him and Derrick Henry, but they played pretty well. And Quan Alexander with the late game interception to seal the deal. So, I mean, the Steelers got it done, and I don't know who it was, but I think it was today or yesterday, someone on NFL Network or something said that this 5-3 team, like the Steelers are 5-3, but they are the worst team in the NFL. And I mean, there are some signs of that. Like there's been a lot of bad play for the Steelers, but they're also 5-3, and there's currently 4 teams in the AFC North in the playoffs. So,
yeah, absolutely. That was the most Steelers game, and it takes a special kind of fan to understand what I mean, or it could be every fan. I don't know, but you just never felt like they were going to lose that game, but you also never felt too confident that they were comfortably in the driver's seat. Granted, they were trailing for a decent part of it, so that's kind of a no-duh situation. But I just never truly believed they weren't going to win it, and they found a way to get ahead. And whether you want to thank the crappy play calling from the Tennessee side of things, or you want to credit sideline Matt Canada being the next evolution of a Steelers legend, I mean, it was a win that gave you some promise, and I'm kind of excited to see what they do against Green Bay here this week. But a few talking points from that Titans game before we move fully into the Green Bay discussion. I think this is something I've brought up before, and I don't want to pretend that this is a unique thought to myself, but Kenny Pickett missed some really, really easy throws in this game, and I don't want to sit here and make a swift change of the blame. And I'm not also saying there always needs to be a scapegoat, and I'm not trying to alleviate some of the pressure Canada has on him, because he obviously has not done a very good job. Whether you want to blame Pickett and his limitations or whatever, Canada's done some really head-scratching things this season, and I think it's time for them to move on from him come the offseason. But, is he trying to call plays that he knows protect Kenny Pickett a little more? Because we saw Pickett miss a wide-open George Pickens. He could have ran to the hills. He could have been in Baldwin. He could have ran so far, man. He could have knocked on Nate's front door, but he wouldn't have been there because he would have been at Highmark Stadium. I mean, he could have ran forever. He missed Johnson, and then I think he missed Robinson, but that might have been wrong on my end. But he missed at least 2 or 3, or no, the Calvin Austin play, where sure he didn't lead him far enough. Austin still should have caught the ball. Not Alvin and the Chipmunks. Calvin Austin, he kind of had to turn and wait for it to get to him, where if Kenny hit him in stride, he would have ran it to the house. And still some of that's on Austin, but more so on Kenny for just not leading him. He had him torched. So those are just 3 plays in my mind that really stick out as, when do we kind of admit maybe Kenny Pickett's just not where we need him to be? And you watch Will Levis, and sure, he had the game-icing interception that he threw, but he seems to be a lot more confident. He plays with a lot more energy, I noticed. You get every once in a while, the occasional Kenny Pickett showing some intensity and some tenacity. You're like, hell yeah, that's my quarterback. But Levis had it from the get-go, and I just really enjoyed watching Levis, and there was that feeling inside of, the Titans got their guy. They got a baller on that team. I don't care if he puts his mayonnaise in his coffee. That's a guy you want to rally for and fight for. And I think a lot of Steeler fans are kind of jealous that you don't have that confidence yet with Kenny Pickett, and some of the things he did in that game just really reaffirmed those feelings.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. I was just going to say, though, I mean, I think the downside for Kenny Pickett is he continues to win. And I think you really aren't going to be able to make adjustments with him until they're really losing badly. Like, once they start going on a streak where they're losing, that's when I think Kenny Pickett could turn things around. But I think the fact that he thinks, okay, I get it done in the fourth quarter and when it matters, he's not really, pressing to get better in the other aspects of the game, which, I'm sure he is. But I'm just saying, week in and week out, he continues to get it done in certain slivers of the game. We may never see a full 60 minutes from Kenny Pickett. We just may never see it. We finally saw a decent first drive, and still he was missing guys, a couple incompletions, but a couple passes to Deontay Johnson to set up the Najee Harris run. But I think it's kind of a downside. The Steelers continue to win, and they're 5-3, and there's all this talk of playoffs right now. But until I think they start losing a little bit more, we're not going to see change from Pickett himself.
Yeah, I think Nate brings up a really good point where, with Kenny Pickett being able to pull out these games and the Steelers team winning the winning that they're doing. Yes, on paper it looks good. They have a 5-3 record. They pull out games in the end, but really until you start to see this team face some adversity and face some losing, and you don't really want to look at that, and you don't really want to see this Steelers. Everyone talks about the never had a losing season, but at some point you have to look at it and think, is keeping that 9-8 record and keeping that winning season streak alive really doing all of that amount of good? Because when you look at Kenny Pickett, he needs to face some tough losses. He needs to lose badly and really have a game where he's just atrocious through all 4 quarters and all 60 minutes of the game, and really get that, those mistakes that he made in the Tennessee game, missing open receivers, even missing Johnson in the Jacksonville game, things like that. For the most part, they didn't really play a huge role in the win in those 2 games. They sure amounted to something in that nature, but when you look at, they're still winning games, like Nate said. They're still putting together a pretty solid season, even though the way that they're winning is not pretty and very ugly throughout most of the game, and they're just able to pull it out. But you really need to see the Steelers team lose games and not have. I don't even. It's hard to say because you don't want to say like, oh, this team needs to take, this team needs to lose. But at this point, where are you getting with this Steelers team if they're going to be that mediocrity that we've seen the Steelers team play out over these past several years? Yes, they've had their spurts where you really think, oh, they can make a run at this. But in the end, especially over these past 2 seasons, what's that going to amount to? You're going to barely sneak into the playoffs, or past 3 seasons, you're barely going to sneak into the playoffs by winning a Week 17, Week 18 game, or you're not going to make the playoffs at all and finish 9-8. So at this point, I think you really need to look at what good is this, the wins that they're stacking together and putting together, benefiting, is this actually benefiting the Steelers team? And really at this point, I don't think it is.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where you're excited they're winning, but at the same time, it makes it hard to make the changes that feel like they need to make. Because when you're winning, it's hard to say, okay, let's fire our offensive coordinator and let's abandon on our second-year quarterback. It's hard to do that when they finish with the winning season, regardless of how ugly it was to get there. But speaking of ugly, George Pickens, I'm not talking about his looks personally because I look like me. But, obviously he's been a little frustrated with his role all season. It was a big thing with him coming out of college, his temper and how he conducted himself, blah, blah, blah. And Steelers are no strangers to having wide receivers who cause a little bit of a ruckus. But, he didn't drag his foot on his would-be touchdown catch. He's obviously very upset about that. And then Johnson scores and he doesn't go over and celebrate. And granted, a lot of people on the offense didn't go over and celebrate with him, but Pickens immediately walks off the field. Then after the game, he wipes his social media and has "free me" or whatever in the corner of his Instagram post. So it was a little alarming. Again, Steelers kind of have that PTSD from what Antonio Brown brought. But today, Tomlin kind of dismissed it and said he was happy that Pickens was upset and wants to contribute and wants the ball. Pickens said that none of it was related to what's going on field, which is one of the worst lies I've ever heard in my entire life. But what do you guys make of this whole situation? Because I personally like where Tomlin's head's at, but I've also seen Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster, and what happened with all of them. And I don't want this to happen with George Pickens. So, I mean, what do you make out of all of this?
I think when you looked at George Pickens coming in to this Steelers team after being drafted, you knew the baggage that you had on him, even before coming in, even before getting drafted and starting his playing career professionally with the Steelers. You knew his behavior and the antics that he pulled at Georgia. You saw that already. So the first thing that I noticed when I saw Pickens was drafted and seeing all of his issues that he had with Georgia was like, oh no, here we go again. There's another diva in the locker room in this wide receiver.
He worked hard to get his hands in the little frame.
I know.
With him.
It was hard
very
to
impressive.
get in there. So here's another diva in the locker in this Steelers locker room, in this wide receiver room. How's that all gonna mesh? Well, first season didn't really see much. He stayed for the most part pretty calm, but in year 2, he's getting a little bit more antsy and anxious and not really seeing the effects that he wants to have and not being able to play the way he wants to play. And now you're seeing these issues start to arise. And yeah, as someone who was in this city and who has seen everything play out with Juju, with Claypool, with AB, yeah, it frightens you. It frightens the hell out of you when you look at it this way. You see Pickens pulling this and seeing what he's been able to do, and even just not dragging his toe in the end zone where he had plenty of space to do it, like you said, Nick. It's alarming to see that, but at some point you just got to think, yeah, he hasn't played a major role in a lot of these games over the past couple of weeks. But really at this point, you just gotta hunker down. And for Tomlin to dismiss something like that, I think you've seen him dismiss things like that and problems like this before, and look where it's led receivers and whoever it may be that have experienced these types of issues. Look where it's gotten them, and it hasn't been any positive that's come out. It hasn't been a positive to come out of it. So just to see this happen again, and it's very frightening. Time will tell this week, and obviously into these next 2 weeks with 2 big divisional opponents. Time will tell to see if this will actually take a toll on the Steelers team. But right now, it's kind of just a concerning look if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I mean, George Pickens certainly wears his heart on his sleeve. I mean, you know when he's upset on the sideline. You know when he's excited. You all right, Ethan?
What?
Oh, I am. Was just thinking of Rod Wave. Carry on.
All right, I was just a little confused. All right. Anyways, thought we were gonna have a little diva moment between me and Ethan. Might have to come and slap him through the screen. Anyways, look, I mean, George Pickens is obviously upset. I mean, with the amount of targets he got and the performance he put up against Tennessee. And yes, I mean, he had a short touchdown that he should have made. I mean, those 2 feet got to be in, and he's made catches like that before. So, I mean, so interesting that he was unable to make it, because we've seen he has the ability to do that. I don't think right now you have to worry so much about him. I mean, if this continues, yes, but I think it's the whole, as Nick, as you mentioned, a little bit of PTSD from all the receivers, the lineage that we've seen the past couple of years. But I mean, how many wide receivers on a team are truly getting, together and along together really well? I mean, they're battling for the amount of targets they get. They're battling for the amount of receptions. And George Pickens had a pretty poor game. Not a lot of targets, 2 receptions, another touchdown that should have been completed. But right now, I mean, I think it comes down to, honestly, I think Mike Tomlin needs to take more control of it and just make sure this doesn't turn into another one of those scenarios that we've seen in the past. All right, I'll let the 2 giggly men continue.
Thank you. I mean, this is one of those things where, there's just been so much negative press about the Steelers, and that's not something you're accustomed to, or at least that's what you're conditioned to believe. The Steelers do things the right way, old-fashioned kind of, the team goes before you, that kind of deal. And this year, there's just been so much negative scrutiny about them and the way they've played, just things happening off the field, blah, 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 blah. And this George Pickens thing just seems like it's an unnecessary kind of topic to distract people from some of the progress they've been making and the promise they've been showing these last couple of weeks. And between that and what's happened with some wide receivers beforehand, it's understandable to be worried. But I think it's just a guy who wants the ball, and I think they'll be able to kind of figure this out before it gets too bad, I guess. But anyway,
there's not a problem with that either. There's not a problem with that one in the ball more. I mean, that's not a bad thing.
No, that's what
wants to
Tomlin's
help the
getting
team.
at.
Yeah.
Tomlin's like, he wants to win, and I want that guy here, and I'm sure they'll find a way to right the wrong here. But maybe someone in the Steelers' media relations team helps him not go and be cryptic on Instagram, because that it's not a good look. It's not a good look. There is a good look this weekend, and that's when the Steelers play Green Bay, because for one of the first times, potentially the first time, I feel kind of good about this game. Green Bay's got a pretty good defense, but I think the Steelers are going to be able to go out there and, I don't want to say have their way, because I don't think the Steelers could have their way with almost anybody in the National Football League right now. But I think the Steelers, and I'm very cautiously saying all of this, I think they could put together a very nice win against Green Bay. With the new turf at Acrisure, by the way. They rolled in some new turf. That was a big talking point earlier this week.
Yeah, I think when you look at this game, Green Bay third in the NFC North with a below 500 record, 3-5. Jordan Love's first season starting under center for the Packers has had its up and downs throughout the year so far. But just looking at this game for the Steelers, this is a game that you need to win, especially heading in to these next two weeks with Cleveland and Cincinnati on the horizon and on the road. This is a home game that the Steelers need to have with the schedule that they have, with the schedule that's coming up for them. It's a game that they definitely need to win. It's a game that I think they can win, but they're just going to have to put some things together. I don't think the Steelers are going to have their way and find more success. I think it's going to be yet another ugly, gutty win for the Steelers. I don't think we're going to see that full Kenny Pickett game, or at least first, second, or third quarter Kenny Pickett game. I think it's still going to come a majority in the fourth quarter, and this defense is going to continue to keep the Steelers in the ball game over the course of the game. I just don't see the Steelers really getting away from any sort of opponent that they play, other than maybe Arizona and New England later in the year. I just think they're going to continue to play it tight and just really remain in the game until the latter stages of the contest and find a way to win and really set themselves up nice with a 6-3 record heading into two crucial division matchups.
Yeah, I think this one's going to be one on the ground. I mean, we've seen the past 2 out of 3 games for the Steelers where they've been able to find the end zone, through the rushing game. We saw the Rams, they finally were able to break through for a couple scores. And then last week, I mean, it was their 166 yards has been a season high on the ground between Warren and Najee Harris, a couple big runs for both of them. And so I think those two backs are really going to have to control this game for the Steelers. I think we're seeing the offensive line, play better than we've seen obviously early on. But I think for Green Bay, it's also going to come on the ground. Aaron Jones is finally healthy. He ran for 73 yards last week and a touchdown. Helped me out a little bit in my fantasy team. So it's nice to have him back healthy. But still, I mean, the Steelers, we've seen how they played against some running backs this year. And I think Aaron Jones is a guy, I mean, he can do a little bit of everything out of the backfield, on the ground. So I think this game is going to have to be won, through the trenches. So we'll see what happens. But if we're going to predictions, though, I think the Steelers are going to pull it out. I think they're going to cover, and they're going to win 24-20.
I like that. I like where your head's at. I think this is going to be a good win, like I was getting at earlier. I think it's going to be a win where you sweat it out, as you were both saying. But I think Pittsburgh gets it done. I want to see another Najee touchdown this week. I want to see Kenny. I want to see him incorporate maybe a big fella, whether it be Washington, whether it be Connor Hayward. I want to see him get one of the big fellas involved in the offense here with Pat Freiermuth out. They've done a kind of decent job of getting Hayward involved every now and then. I just want to see him put together a nice drive, get in the red zone, and hit one of the big fellas down there. Nice gritty little conclusion to the drive. I got Pittsburgh winning this one by a final score of 26-20. Also, shout out to me. I was the first one to pick a game correctly with the final score included. So thank you to me for that one. That was nice to get our street cred up a bit with that one. Ethan, you're all that's left, bud.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's going to be a tight game. And I just think the Steelers narrowly squeak this one out. I'm going to go 27-24 Steelers. I think they pull it out. I think we see Kenny Pickett really show some glimpses of fire in the fourth quarter play once again, and just really able to ice things for the Steelers late. But I think it's going to come off of Boswell's foot in the end, with the Steelers winning by 3.
All right. I also want to point out, if you look at the Green Bay schedule, and I meant to bring this up earlier, but unfortunately that important announcement I had to put up on the bottom of the ticker there earlier, it slipped my mind. This Green Bay team, I don't want to discredit them. I know they're kind of in a transitional phase of this franchise with Rodgers gone. They beat the Bears, whoop-de-doo. They beat the Saints by 1. Their losses are not very good losses. They lost to the Falcons. They lost to the Lions. The Lions are pretty good this year, so I'll give them that one. They lose to the Raiders by 4. They lose to the Broncos. Broncos country, they're always riding. Ride till they can't no more. Whatever. Then they lose to the Vikings. And then they get a win over the Matthew Stafford-less Rams. It's not that impressive to me. I'm not going to sit here and discredit them too much because I think they have some really exciting guys on that team, and I know they're dealing with a handful of injuries right now. It's just I think this is a game Pittsburgh can win, and I think it's very fair in us having a little bit of confidence in that. But we're also confident right now because college hoops is back. All 3 Pittsburgh area D1 schools playing on Monday night, was it the 6th? Yeah, Monday night, all 3 involved. And I'm going to tell you right now, Duquesne, we do not give, no disrespect to my pal, Coach Dambrot, we could not care less about Duquesne basketball. You got 3 RMU grads here. Pitt's putting the asses in seats. We all went to RMU. We all got the expensive paper from them. Duquesne, no hate intended. It's just you're the redheaded stepchild this time when we're talking about the Pittsburgh schools. That's a very layered joke right there. That's a very layered joke that many people won't understand, but it's a good one, I promise. But anyway, guys, college hoops is back. It's a great time of the year, Ethan's favorite time of the year. I heard him telling loved ones that he wishes he cared about their birthdays and significant days in their lives as much as he cared about Pittsburgh college basketball teams being back in action. But Ethan, this is your bread and butter. I can't believe it's basketball season, and I can't believe it's not butter. What do you have to say just as a precursor to this season so far?
I think it's been, especially from the Pittsburgh area schools, I think it's been a breath of fresh air just seeing how they've all played. Obviously, Pitt manhandling NC-A&T easily Monday evening, had that game on before the Robert Morris game started. They were up 50 to 25 at the half or something like that. So they were putting the hammer down on the Aggies Monday night. So just to see how they kind of put 40 minutes together there after a season where they made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament, March Madness, to see what they did. And really, they're playing NC-A&T, but really just picked up kind of where they left off last year. Obviously, they're looking to take a little step down this year after losing some guys like Nelly Cummings and players like that. But if you're the Panthers, you have to be very excited, especially with their first 4 games of the season, very winnable games for the University of Pittsburgh. So just seeing how they play over the course of this early season, they got Binghamton, there we go, on Friday, and then they got a date with Jacksonville over this next week. And while I can't even talk, but yeah, some winnable games for Pitt early on in their schedule. But just looking at them and looking at how they played Monday night, that's very exciting. But yeah, overall, great that college hoops is back.
Yeah, I mean, this is – no, go ahead, Nate, if you want to.
No, Nick, it's all you right now.
Oh, thank you. We got a bit of the giggles here. Stranded with the giggles is, I think,
Absolutely.
the name of this
Yeah,
episode.
yeah.
You make one Rod Wave joke and everybody starts going crazy. And then Ethan develops a case of the stutters and it just snowballs there. But we are professionals, I promise you that. You're sitting here with two award-winning journalists and me. Anyway, the damn tab I just opened is playing. But yeah, I mean, this Pitt team, I think, is going to be a lot of fun. You have Diaz Graham squared coming off the bench. Will Jeffress is back. We've heard Coach Capel be really excited about that, and he's from Erie, so I'm going to take any chance I can get to pump Will Jeffress's brakes, or not brakes, the gas pedal on him, I guess. Hinson's back, Federico. I mean, and they all looked good, all the main players, and then you get Carrington out there having a phenomenal game, making some history in the process. And I think this Pitt team is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and I'm going to follow them a lot closer than I typically follow the Pitt Panthers basketball squad this year, because I think this is a team that's going to have some pretty big ACC wins here and maybe make some headway in this conference. But what I really want to dive into now is the Robert Morris Colonials, and not a lot. We're just going to touch on it, but I thought a lot of the names you wanted to see involved had a pretty good showing in that first game against Xavier. Justice Williams came over, a lot of fanfare from him. He has a pretty good night. He scores 21 points. Then you have Hastings come over. He did pretty well. And then obviously you have Jackson Last and Josh Corbin, and they both had some pretty rough nights shooting. But I mean, you'd like to think they'll come into their own, they'll find their rhythm. So a pretty good showing. Granted, it's a loss, but they gave Xavier a pretty good run for their money. They led for a good chunk of the first half, ended the first half with that emphatic dunk, and we're down by 6 points or whatever at the break. It's pretty good showing. RMU's always going to be cycling in transfers, and unfortunately, they'll cycle out some transfers every now and then. And this was a team with a decent amount of turnover, losing guys like Michael Green and Khalil Spear and some others. And I think they came out and they gave Xavier hell for a bit there, and it was pretty fun to watch. And then, of course, Duquesne, who I know I made some jokes earlier, but I know a lot of people are expecting some big things from them in the A10 this year. Grant came back, obviously had a really good game on his end, and they edge out a pretty tough win against Cleveland State, who I'll always root against them for reasons people don't really need to understand, but I'll always gleefully root against Cleveland State, especially after how they ended RMU season last year. So it's nice to see the Dukes pick up a pretty big win against a very reputable Horizon League foe to open their season. And that was Nick's thoughts on everyone's opening game of the year in about a minute and a half. So you're welcome.
Yeah, I'll chime in real quick. Back on the Pitt side of things, I thought, both you guys said, I mean, pretty impressive win against a, not so great team in NCAA, but I think the one thing that has been huge, especially why they were an NCAA tournament team last year and why I think they're going to be, in the running again to make the tournament again this year. In Capel's first few seasons, they only had one or two guys that would score double digits every night. But this team this year and last year, they had several guys that can score 10 plus or even get to 20 in a game. And I think we're going to see that yet again from Pitt. And we saw Bub Carrington with the big triple-double to start the season. Blake Hinson quietly put up 13 points. Federico, 13 points. I think their front court or their forwards are going to play a lot better than they did last year. Diaz Graham's squared, as Nick said, and Federico. I think the size that they bring, and I think another year under them, within the program is going to be huge for Jeff Capel and Pitt. And they're going to be competing for another championship within the ACC. I mean, it went down to the wire last year for the regular season title, and they were right in the thick of things pretty much all the way to the end. So I think this is going to be a fun team to watch, and I think the freshmen are going to get into the mix pretty quickly, and I think they're going to play some big minutes, especially Bub Carrington and Jalen Lowe. You'll see a lot of them. But RMU, as Nick, as you mentioned, they played pretty well against Xavier. Ethan, I mean, this is a much better opening game than we've seen the past few years against Ohio State and then UCF and Kentucky the year before that. So I think, that's a good sign. I think Steph Walker looks a lot better already. I thought he played pretty well. I thought in the first half early on when they were scoring, it looked like their offense was playing at a little bit more of an up-tempo game than we've seen in the past. And Andy Toole usually preaches that defense, but I thought the offense was rolling pretty good early. Steph Walker was a big part of that. Justice Williams obviously putting up 21 points in his RMU debut. But I thought, there were some good signs. The only thing that, got to be worried about with RMU is their depth. I mean, they don't really have much of a bench. TJ Wainwright coming off the bench, Chris Ford as well, and then a couple freshmen. So it's going to be that's going to be the one tough spot for the Colonials. But I think we saw a good showing, and they'll be back at it on Thursday.
Yeah, I think when you look at this Robert Morris team, you like Nate said, it was a very good opening game for the Colonials, and just to see the glimpses of what they were able to do, especially Justice Williams, just watching him work, a guy that was a highly touted prospect out of high school at Mount Verde Academy, and going into LSU, didn't really have a lot of success there, and then transferring to Robert Morris, there was a lot of hype surrounding that, and just to see him come out the way that he did against a very tough Xavier team, it was a very nice sight to see, especially just with his quickness, his quick steps, and just his ability to not only, score from the field, but also really be able to slash and get some points down low driving. I think that's something that you really like to see. Obviously, the shooting's going to come. He was only 1 for 5 from deep, and that's something that really needs to change, especially for this team as a whole, is their 3-point shooting. But I think you saw some great glimpses of him. Also, Marquise Hastings with the double-double Monday night for the Colonials. He was another guy that Robert Morris was very high on coming into this season, and one of the top rebounders in the MAC last year. So really being able to get his size to kind of fill the void for Khalil Spear, who's now playing over in Italy this year. Also, you got to look at some of the freshmen as well. We might be starting to see some depth starting to build around this team. Obviously, time will tell, but you really need to look at guys like Jackson Lash, Josh Corbin. Those 3 guys those 2 guys, along with TJ Wainwright, they can be the guys that could be those other scoring options other than Williams, Hastings, and Walker. Those are the guys that can really start to build this depth on this team. You sprinkle in some freshmen, and you're looking at a team that's a lot more well-rounded and has a lot more ability to score the basketball throughout all stages of the game. And I think that's something that you haven't really seen from this Robert Morris team since entering into the Horizon League. And I think now you're kind of starting to see, obviously it's only the first game of the year, but just to start to see those depth pieces starting to come out of the woodwork. And you hope for Robert Morris, if you're Robert Morris, that's a sign of things to come as the year progresses.
Absolutely. That was a lot, Ethan. That was a lot. But
I had to get it all in.
I can tell. I can tell how important that was to you. But yeah, excited for college hoops to be back here in the Pittsburgh area. Really quickly here, because Ethan filibustered on the college basketball, which we all knew. I'm just kidding. We'll move on to Penguins. Their West Coast swing underway. 2 wins so far. One of them came against the Sharks, which would be like if I beat the local 7 and under basketball team single-handedly, but that's okay. They couldn't, they managed to beat the Flyers, so that's pretty funny. I'll always root against them too, for reasons unbeknownst to a lot of people on this show. But yeah, Tristan Jarry got hurt yesterday. Took a butt to the face. I don't know how to say that in a way that doesn't sound funny, but that's basically literally what happened. Collided, mask came up a bit, puck hit him in the face, it looks like, was bleeding. Helberg comes in, finishes the shutout for him. But Nate, it sounds like Jarry's going to be day-to-day, but what are your thoughts overall on that situation there?
Yeah, I mean, Tristan Jarry, I think the last 2 games has played better. I mean, obviously against the Sharks, that's not a whole lot to ask. But the Ducks, against the Ducks, they didn't put a ton of quality shots on goal, but he did his job. But I don't think he's going to be out long. I mean, it's just a cut right around the eye. I mean, hopefully it's not, directly in the eye and any sort of damage from there. But I don't think so. I think, he'll be back pretty quickly. He'll probably sit out. I mean, they'll probably have Hellberg play against the Kings. And then, once they return back to their regular schedule away from the West Coast swing, I mean, you'll probably see Tristan Jarry back. But, I mean, all in all, I mean, the first 2 games for the Pens, they played pretty well. I think, there's not much to be said about the San Jose game. I mean, they just poured in goals left and right. But the Anaheim game, I mean, they controlled a lot of the puck. However, they didn't get a ton of great shots on goal. Rickard Rakell had a couple good shots, and he's still looking for his first goal. But Zahorna with the lone goal, sort of just crashing the net, poking in a rebound off of John Gibson, and then Crosby finishing the game off with a sky-high backhand, that patented backhand empty net goal. But I think the Penguins did what they needed to do so far in the first 2 games of the West Coast swing, and they have the Kings up next. They just have to complete the job, and it's early. I mean, everyone was really worried about where the Pens would be, and they're 5-6 right now. They're last in the Metro, but they're 2 points out of 5th place. So, I mean, not too much to worry about, except there is some glaring issues that need to be fixed. And I think Jeff Carter, being a healthy scratch could be something in the right direction, because he obviously has made 0 impact so far for this Pens team. So getting some younger guys in there and giving them some playing time has been helpful, and especially Zahorna. I mean, he had a good training camp, and he's showed it so far through the couple games he's played.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Kings will be a good test for I almost said Pirates, for the Penguins. Interested to see how they can close out that West Coast swing. As always, Penguin Talk brought to you by our good friends at Pure Hockey. That's right. If you want to find hockey merchandise, including skates, sticks, protective bags, protective gear, jerseys, accessories, goal equipment, and even NHL apparel. We didn't start the fire. You can go to Pure Hockey through the link in our bio. Neither of you gave that the reaction it deserved, but that's okay. I still love you. Pure Hockey, go through the link in our bio. Tell them we sent you, and our friends at Stadium Scene TV. Thank you very much to Pure Hockey for always sponsoring Penguin Talk each and every week, right here on Stranded in Pittsburgh. Speaking of the Pirates, Key Brian Hayes is a Gold Glover. About damn time. I won't quote Lizzo very often, but I will right now, because it's about damn time. Way to go, Key. Glad they didn't find a way to give Arenado this year. But with that in mind, it's almost been 45 minutes. Time flies when you're having fun. We'll start with Nate. Any last thoughts before you depart us for this week?
I was just going to mention Brian Hayes. I mean, how about that? It's snapping the 10-year streak of Arenado winning those. And it was bound to happen. The first Pirates third baseman in history to win the Gold Glove, and now he's vying for the Platinum Glove. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, congratulations to Brian Hayes and getting something he was deserving of.
College basketball season is officially back, and I can't be more happy. But how about the underwhelming schedule over these first couple of days of the season? It's been very underwhelming. Not a lot of ranked on ranked action, and just haven't really seen a lot of these top schools go at one another. We're going to have to wait until the end of the week and into next week, but can't be more happy, especially to see how all of these Pittsburgh teams have played a lot of promise, especially after many, many down years for a lot of these programs over the course of these past couple of years. So great that it's back, and great that the city of Pittsburgh is experiencing some good basketball once again.
Absolutely. Speaking of the city of Pittsburgh, my travels recently brought me to the Primanti Brothers restaurant. Now, I've never been a big fan of Primanti Brothers, but the last couple times I went there, I will say, it really blown my socks off. There's nothing quite like a Pittsburgher, and in my last endeavor, my wife was going to be cooking dinner for me when I got home, so I just ordered an appetizer, which happened to be the mozzarella wedges. They were very tasty. The marinara sauce is very sweet, and I've really enjoyed my time there. And you couldn't have asked for better company, because these two were also there with me. Granted, it wasn't alone, it wasn't a triple date, but it was very nice to have some good food with good friends. And I was a long-time detractor of Primanti's, saying it was overrated, saying it must just be a Pittsburgh thing that I can't understand. And maybe, just maybe, triangular mozzarella wedges isn't the dish to go around touting as a great success. However, I really believe that Primanti Brothers is a good chain and a great representation of the Steel City. # not sponsored. But you know what?
It's
always good when you can dip into the local culture the way I was dipping my mozzarella wedges into the marinara sauce. I really had a good time there at Primanti Brothers. I think I'll be returning soon. So you know what? There's nothing wrong with just agreeing with the mainstream opinion. We all want to be different once in a while, but sometimes you just have to sit back, throw your legs up on the ottoman, and say, they make some pretty damn good food, including the fried mozzarella wedges. This has been Stranded in Pittsburgh. We'll see you next time. Take care of yourselves.